Hi. Well, welcome to the basics of podcasting. My name is Joe Farron. I use he, him, his pronouns. I would just like to say before we get started, thank you so much to Wendy Sasaki and all the folks in the APIMEDA. APIMEDA, I don't even know, like, the office, the group, the center. I just like,
Nope,
I'd
not a
be like,
center.
just
Programs and
Wendy. Like,
services office. Yep, we're an
programs
office.
and services. Thank you. I was like, them there. Thank you so much for having me and, allowing me to share something that is one of the things that I'm very passionate about. And I hope that anyone who watches this presentation later, everyone here in the room, they get something from it and, inspires you to, create your own content, because that's kind of what a lot of even the most successful podcasters say, is that it was a way for them to have control over their voice, over their narrative, and tell their story, and they saw the lack of representation in other places, and they use this to help propel that forward. So that's, I hope it inspires you. I mean, that whole meme of like everyone has a podcast is true in some parts for a reason, because it's definitely like a populist medium, and we'll learn all about that today. So let's go here. So we're going to talk about it's a very, very simple presentation. We're going to talk about what it takes to like develop your concept. We'll go over equipment, training, and some resources that you may need to get started. And then we'll talk a little bit about, okay, so you have your concept, you have the equipment, you have some training. What do you do next? How to get it off the ground? So it's going to be a very, this presentation is designed so that way, like, you can pump out your first 5 episodes after a little bit of training and, move forward from there. So let's talk about it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, why I'm doing the presentation, like about me. So I've been podcasting for about 7 years now. My journey with podcasts started when I had a job in between my junior and senior year of college, where I was literally transferring numbers from one column to another column at night for 5 hours, sitting in an office in a cubicle. And all of a sudden, the movie Office Space made sense to me, and that office culture. So when I exhausted all of my music playlists, I decided to start listening to podcasts. And then from there, I fell in love with the medium and, the abilities of people to tell stories and report things out from then. And so that was in 2009. I apologize. That's between my sophomore and junior year of college. So 2009, and then cut to a few more years later, 2014, I actually purchased equipment, start my first podcast, that went for about 20 episodes, and then, moved on to the shows that I do now. So, I started out literally with buying a book that was Podcasting for Dummies. And because I had Google at the time, but I was like, here, let me get a book. So Podcasting for Dummies, and bought a new computer, microphone, and we'll talk more about that equipment later. And then just started doing it. And when I started out, I didn't know anything about editing. I didn't know anything about how to have guests on, or how to do it remotely, or anything like that. So I've learned a lot in the last few years, and I'm still learning. I learned something new this past week. So there's always room for improvement, and always ways to constantly innovate and change how you do things. In the pictures here are some of the cool guests that I've gotten the opportunity to speak to on my shows. That's in the first picture with that's me. And then the other gentleman on the other side, his name is Joshua. We do Fright School, which is my horror film podcast. We're there with interviewing filmmaker Chelsea Stardust, who recently her second feature, Satanic Panic, came out last year. So there's us talking to her in her home. In the second picture, that's in her home as well. We, with my other podcast partner, Wendy, for our arts podcast, we interviewed Ashley Nell Tipton, who is the season 14 winner of Project Runway. She's also from San Diego, so we got to sit in her studio and speak to her a little bit about what that was like to go through Project Runway. And then the last picture is there with my other co-host, Wendy, and Nick Cartel, who is a Broadway actor, performer. He was the lead in Les Miserables during the national tour last year. And so we actually got to see him at the Pantages in LA and interview him in his dressing room before the show, and then went backstage after. So, pretty cool things that basically happened. Not only like the podcast was a vehicle for it, but I wouldn't have been able to do any of that outside of that. So just some cool stuff there. So the first things first is developing a concept. So what are you going to talk about, right? Why do we need to do a podcast? Why does it work as a podcast? So the first thing you want to think about when you're developing your show is what type of format are you going to have? Like, what type of format do you want your show to be? Is this going to be you just talking at the world and talking only into the microphone with your musings, reading stories? Are you going to have guests on? Are you going to have a co-host? And, so think about what it is that you're actually going to be doing and how the show's going to break down. And this is where, just making out an outline, cut to, freshman, ninth grade English, making out your outline of like how your show is going to flow, format, and so on. So I've actually included a couple of great podcasts that I've listened to, and I encourage all of you to also check out, all with APIMEDA identified hosts and creators. So we have Yo, Is This Racist, which they have is also an interview show. So it's two hosts and then a third person. Same thing with Las Culturistas. And Las Culturistas, and I want to say even Yo, Is This Racist, because Entry T is a comedian. So they have that comedy. They have that comedy bent to them, and there are a lot of comedy podcasts out there. So if you're going into that space, more power to you. There's a ton of people who are, various types of comedians that are doing stuff. So go for it and just don't look back. But they both have, these two shows are both interview based around a central theme. So usually it's right there in the title, Yo, Is This Racist? And then with Las Culturistas, it's like talking about the guest and how they deal and like what they think about in culture and their experience with like culture, capital C. And then you have another form of podcasting that's really popular is recap podcasting. So, people who take entire seasons of television, either that are already streaming and have long gone, or they are ongoing. So they're recapping, everything from RuPaul's Drag Race and The Real Housewives to old episodes of Saved by the Bell. My favorite podcast that's one of these shows is the Gilmore Guys, where it's two guys who recap with a guest episodes of the Gilmore Girls. But I wanted to highlight here the West Wing Weekly, which is Joshua Malina, who was on the West Wing, and then his co-host and co-creator is Rishi Hirway, who has many podcasts. And his voice is just a delight to listen to. They do recaps of The West Wing, which also can include, having people on the show and what have you. So if you think of your favorite show, there probably is a podcast that's recapping it. And then you have like the more kind of journalism style podcasts where it's around a central theme. There's reporting, very news magazine, 2020, 60 minutes style, but, for definitely for in a modern way. And that's Nancy, also Radio Lab. These two WNYC shows. Nancy, which is an LGBT podcast, the hosts Tobin Lowe and Kathy Tu, um, are both Asian American. We have Dolly Parton's America, which is hosted by Jad Abumrad from Radiolab fame, which is a very interesting podcast because it all kind of stems. There's a really lovely episode where he interviews his father, and his father talks about like how when Dolly Parton talks about her Tennessee mountain home, that it reminds him a lot of his home in Iran. So, talking about those intersections and kind of how Dolly pervades culture. And then Offshore, on the other side here, Offshore is a journalism style podcast specifically related to the Pacific Islands. So they have a whole season about, right now they're doing a whole season about Hawaii and people who are the diaspora that's leaving Hawaii and why they leave. They've done some really great reporting on other aspects of Pacific Island life in Samoa, on Guam. So, which is, I was very, very happy to discover this podcast because it was nice to get that bit of representation as well. And then you might decide that maybe you want to do, you're not into like reporting and you want to do maybe a narrative podcast. So in the style of like a radio drama. And most people, when you say radio drama, they think like old timey detectives and, mid-Atlantic accents and that sort of thing. But there's so much modern podcasting in terms of radio audio drama is taking that to the next level with the different ways that they edit and the content. This particular one, Moonface, is by James Kim, who is a journalist, audio journalist, but he also created this like semi-autobiographical podcast that's about his life as a young 20-something, still recently college graduated, still living at home, and dealing with his identity as both a queer Korean American, but like also wanting more, not knowing how to communicate to his mother, because he doesn't speak Korean and she doesn't speak English back to him. There's a very lovely twist at the end. I won't spoil it for you. Definitely listen. So these are just some different types of formats. Again, that's just what's out there. That doesn't mean that like you can't do whatever it is that you want to do. It's really open to your interpretation and how you want to format it. There's a lot of autonomy, and there really aren't any hard and fast rules per se, as long as good people will listen. Another thing when you're developing your concept, and I put these two questions here as the foundational questions, is what's your goal? What are you looking to accomplish with the show? With my shows, my main goal is really just to have fun. So, that should always be high on your list. It's definitely high on mine. But, we're not, I've been doing and we're not really in it to make any type of money or to make this be our full-time jobs and be financially supported by it in any way. But we are in it to establish ourselves as experts in this particular area of culture, and to potentially, release a book highlighting, what it is that we like about the genre. And, if someone wants to throw us money, that, we're not going to sneeze at that, but we're very clear about the fact that we just enjoy doing this show together, and it's a way for us to connect. The same thing with my arts podcast as well. We do it once a month. It's our way to check in with each other. We have fun. And yeah, so as if you're, especially if you're hosting with another person, you want to make sure that, you know, you're both on the same page with regards to what it is that you're looking to accomplish, because you want to be on complete firm footing for that. So once you have your concept and once you've established what your goal is, and so the next thing is, you know, equipment. You need to get equipment. You don't need everything on this list. There are definitely workarounds for things, but you need some form of what is here on this very, very basic list. So you'll need a computer or some sort of, you can also do it on your iPad or your tablet. Some people podcast exclusively from their iPads and tablets, at least when they're in the studio. When it comes to the post-production and the actual editing and mixing of things, it helps to have a computer, whether that's a laptop or a desktop. I've never attempted to record or edit on an iPad, but if you have one that you're able to do that, more power to you. Depending on how large your episodes are, or how long you want to record your episodes, you can record locally on the computer, but that just means that you're either going to be only recording in one location. So if you're using your desktop or your laptop, or you're going to have to bring your laptop with you every single place that you record. If you're looking to have a very mobile setup and to do maybe interviews in places. So for example, if you're, let's say you're doing a sports podcast and you happen to go to a sporting event and you want to talk to players and things, or in what I've seen mostly is that, let's say you're someone who is like a podcaster about video games and you go to conventions and cons and things. You want to make sure that you have that portable, a portable audio recorder is probably the best investment that you can make. These can be very expensive and they can be not expensive at all. It all depends on the kind of quality and what you're able to afford. I personally use a Zoom H6, and I'll show you what that looks like on an upcoming slide, and tell you a little bit more about that. But a portable audio recorder, also you'll need a SD card, because that's you'll be able to, you won't be restricted with how long your podcast can go. So I've listened to podcasts where they were talking about one episode of the Gilmore Girls for 4 hours. Again, because it's, three friends riffing and they're comedy people. But, you can't really record like that on like a laptop. You have very limited memory space, or storage space. So a portable recorder is the way to go if you're looking to not only record longer, but also in different locations. If you're thinking about having like a studio setup, dedicated location where you can, do everything, record, mix, all of that, you want to look into a USB sound mixer. This is just like your regular sound mixer that's going to go plug right into your computer, and you'll be able to record through that. And editing software. So, you want to have some sort of way to not only record the episodes, or to have your pre-recorded episodes uploaded into, to mix and put theme music, advertisements, credits, that sort of thing. There's Audacity is one thing that a lot of people use because it's free, and it's easy to download. It's very intuitive for the most part. Some people, I don't use Audacity myself because I use GarageBand because it's already here on my laptop. I'm in the process right now of looking for other ways to edit and mix, because there's a lot of really great software that's out there right now. So, you definitely need a way to not only mix and convert your episode into MP3 and what have you. Headphones, definitely need a good pair of headphones. The headphones that I'm wearing right now are not my usual headphones. They're my nicer headphones are at my co-host studio in his home, and we are physically distancing right now. So we're not able to be, so I have to use my loaners. But these headphones are fairly inexpensive, and you don't need to have completely noise canceling, but as long as you're able to hear yourself. And you may ask, why? What's the benefit of hearing yourself? Well, you get used to what you sound like on a microphone. Is my is my very simple answer. If you've never really heard yourself, your recorded voice or your voice as it sounds, mediated through electronic devices, you want to wear headphones so that way you know what your listeners are going to hear, and it automatically gets you into that. It gets you into that setting. You need a microphone. Of course, you need a microphone, cords and stands. Most laptops have microphones. They're not going to be good for what you're using. I'm actually using my microphone that I use for podcasting now. It's a microphone that's also used for music, live performance, that sort of thing. It's very versatile. That's the whole reason why I use this type of mic. There are USB microphones that people use specifically for podcasting, or it's the similar types of microphones if they're doing like their Twitch or video, any type of YouTube or video content. But I use this because it's very versatile and can just plug into more things. My goal when buying equipment was to try to be as universal as possible in the event that I took things to different places. Cords and stands. I don't know if you can see this, but I have like this very tiny desktop stand right here. And it's actually on 2 boxes. So, because it's just to get it right up to my face. And its stands are good because that means you're not holding it. Because I used to hold microphones a lot, and then I realized that it was picking up. They were picking up the sounds. So definitely invest in some sort of stand if you're able to. If your mic is not a large Yeti mic. External hard drive. I have an external hard drive that I use as a backup, and then I also have a Dropbox account that's like a terabyte. So I have 2 places where my episodes live. One that I can just keep separate, and then one if I need to access episodes anywhere, I can do it in the cloud. Definitely recommend a place where you can host your episodes, host your show basically, and from there you'll be able to push it out through the site and all of that. Yes, that's correct. So there was a question that came in, a comment about Yetis. So Yetis are good if you're looking because it will pick up sound from multiple directions. And the Yeti that I'm actually going to recommend has different features. So this is pretty much the basic podcasting setup that I have had over the years. This microphone, always check sales at around Black Friday, and I usually try to go to Guitar Center as opposed to like Amazon or what have you, because Guitar Center typically will have everything you need and music shops will typically have ways that you can have things that you would need for like audio production. So some people sleep on Guitar Center or music shops like that. Definitely check those places out, especially when at times of the year when they're going to have a sale. This particular microphone, you can actually change the patterns. You can change it so it's omnidirectional, picking up from all sides. You can change where it's bidirectional, where in the very early days of me podcasting, I would put it on bi and I would just sit it in between me and another person. And then it was fairly good audio quality from there. And then you can also change it to where it's, just your standard microphone where it's just right in front of your face. And if you're just doing any video work or what have you, these are really great. They're heavy. They're supposed to be because they just stay right there on the table. They don't do anything. And it's probably the best microphone that I can I can recommend, especially if you're just starting out. There's your mixer right there. This one's a simple a two input one, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to have more than one guest. So if it's a solo project that you have and you're just interviewing another person, this is a good model to have. Those headphones that there are really great noise canceling over ear. Over ear is always better. In a pinch, your earbuds, your inner earbuds will work, but over ear is so much better because of you're able to just really focus on what it's going to sound like in the recording. And then right there at the bottom, in the bottom left, that's the Zoom. What I have right now, the Zoom H6 audio recorder. Basically, what that is that they on either side there are 4 ports that have XLR, which is what those microphone cords are called, XLR ports. So you're able to actually have 4 different people on, all with their dedicated channel. And then at the top there's actually a microphone input as well. So that's actually a microphone that can be used to do like one-on-one in-person interviews. Last year at Comic-Con, I actually I brought that out and put the microphone on top and did man on the street style interviews at Comic-Con. And it also will show you your levels there. You can actually use it as an audio interface. So instead of a USB mixer, you use the Zoom as the audio interface. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. My audio input and output are all through the Zoom. I can't recommend it enough. It is very expensive, especially when you're starting out. It is very, very expensive. And if you can get one secondhand, refurbished, do it. If you see yourself as this is a project, this is something that you're going to be doing for a long time, and you want to make that type of investment, go for it. Up until I've only been using my Zoom for a year now, and it has dramatically changed how I podcast. I've been able to be more mobile than ever. It's one of the best things I've ever purchased, and I'm definitely seeing my return on the investment. But again, you can do a perfectly great podcast without a recorder like that. You don't need a lot of fancy equipment. You just need to have the basics will serve you very well. It all depends on your taste level too. And then I put these type of XLR cords because if you're having multiple people on your show, even just 4 people or 5 people, it's good to have cords that have different colors. So that way you can determine who's speaking what, and it helps for note taking later. So when you're doing your editing and you're adjusting levels and things, you can visually see very easily which input is going to which person. If you want to take the extra step, so for me, I have pop filters that are different colors as well that match cords, just because I just like to have everything match. You can do that as well too. Podcasting is not necessarily a visual medium, so no one's going to really see it except your audience, but it does help when you're in the room, and especially if you're a little more spread out in a room. I'm dropping in some online resources, places to check out for your when you're starting out your journey. Obviously, Squarespace is a place where a lot of podcasts advertise Squarespace. So, if you're a person who listens to podcasts and you always hear that get that 10% off your first year thing for Squarespace, definitely do it because it's so worth it. And it works. And sometimes if you're listening to older episodes, they probably still have the discount code on there. So if they may not have heard an ad for Squarespace in a while, but they probably still have the discount. So definitely check it out. Squarespace is definitely more the visually, it's visually interesting, but people still do WordPress. There's so many different Wix, so many different types of websites to have out there. Websites are also important because if you're trying to build your personal portfolio, you can have all of your shows linked there in a blog format, and it just becomes like your own portfolio. Pinecast, I'm putting up there because that's the site that I use right now. Pinecast is where I host all of my shows. Never say like how much I pay for something, but I'm going to, because this for the very basic is $5 and I have 4 different shows right now that I am hosting through Pinecast. So right now it's $5 for a month for a set amount of storage, but it turns out to be a lot. Even if you have 5 shows, like 1 weekly and 2 weekly and 1 monthly and what have you. So Pinecast for sure. Plus Pinecast also will push it out to the different podcatchers. So it'll push it out to Apple Podcasts. It'll push it out to Google Play, Spotify. Stitcher is separate. Some of the others are separate, but at least the bigger ones, it'll push it out through. Zencaster is how I'm able to, in this time of physical distancing, is how I'm able to still host a show. So with Zencaster, you basically send a link to somebody via their email, and they hook up their microphone on their end, and you're able to have your you record your podcast that way. And so, you record it in Zencaster, and then you download the file, and then that goes to your editing bay later. The cool thing about Zencaster is that records the local audio. So for example, if your connection is not great and the other person sounds a little, come in a little muffled, you can actually still have a great connection because on their end, it actually sounds fine. So it's recording the local audio and then gives that to you, which is great in this time and has been one of the reasons why I've been able to do a podcast every week, sometimes twice a week, for this entire time that we've been physically distancing. StreamYard, I just found out about last week as a place if you wanted to do live streams. I put it up there because it's mainly built for live streaming video. But once you are finished doing your live stream, you can also download just the audio from it. So if you are a podcaster that's looking to do special episodes and actually engage with your audience where they can see you, this is a way to also collect that content for your podcast later and put that out audio only. Dropbox, of course. You host your files up there. It's an annual thing for the terabyte. I recommend you do it because it's nice to just be able to also access that anywhere on different platforms. And then, of course, Audacity for people to actually edit. We're not going to be talking about the specifics about editing and how to do any of that. We're just talking about the basics and things to know. I myself am still always learning about editing, so and the different and what works and what doesn't work for me. So I recommend that that's a journey you go on yourself. And there's so many different resources out there. A lot of people are writing about podcasting. I'm sure there's a master class somewhere that you can take for it as well. But you definitely want to know some things about editing, at the very least, how to make sure that if someone accidentally says, a piece of information that they don't want other people to know, you want to be able, as a good host, to edit that out. So that way, they don't break their NDA, or they don't, talk about, they said that they weren't going to talk about this because of legal reasons or what have you. So, you want to make sure that you have that, at least have that ability. And speaking of legal reasons, I'm going to bring this up because I don't think a lot of beginner podcast articles that I read talk about this enough. And I want to make sure that it's at least in in your ears as well when you're going on your journey to do your show. So with my shows, we often have guests on the show, and typically we have our guests sign media release forms. I actually hired a lawyer to create a media release form, and then just I switch out names and things, and it's just a PDF now that people do. But the reason why I do that is because in the event that you want to make sure that you own the content, and so you're getting the permission from that person to be able to use their voice and their views and all of those things. And it also makes sure that there's no it's without reproach. The idea that you own that interview and that content. We're still pretty, we're pretty lax because it's not like we're interviewing politicians or anything, but we're pretty open. But when we started for Fright School, when we started interviewing people in Hollywood, people who, have like signed NDAs about projects they can't talk about and things, we wanted to make sure that we protected ourselves as well too. So I do recommend that. You don't necessarily need to hire a lawyer. You can always figure out how to do that. There's ways you can figure out how to do that. But I mean, if you want to make sure that you, are not just writing a bunch of, legal Zoom mumbo jumbo together pursuant to whatever, et cetera, find a way to have a good media form to look at. I want to talk about fair use and audio and video clips. So a lot of shows that are recap shows, they will often include video and not video, but audio from audio clips. And one thing a lot of podcasts want to do is also they want to play music. They want to, be able to add in music from their favorite artists, maybe use that as their theme music, their exit music, intro music, what have you. My general rule of thumb is that if you don't have the express permission to use it, then don't use it. It's, we can get into a conversation about 30 seconds and fair use and all of that, but it's better to just, have that permission to use it. Another thing too is that it's actually a good way if you have friends that are musicians. It's a good way for them to get their work out there as well, and hire your musician friends to write you a custom song. I did that for my newest podcast, MFK Ultimate. I hired a musician on the East Coast who had a really great sound, and he had exactly what I was looking for. And we give him credit every single time. It gets his band name out there, and I have a full use of it without having to worry about RCA or the Disney Corporation coming after me, because they will. They will. And again, like you may think like, oh, I have this podcast that that Wendy and my mom listen to. What makes you think that like these big corporations are going to come after you? Well, the thing is that if your podcast takes off and they see that you're using their IP without intellectual property, without their permission, they will come for you. I've actually seen it happen in podcasts that I've followed. The Las Culturistas theme song for the first 2 seasons, or for the first year, was a clip of a song by the Dixie Cups that they didn't have the permission for, and then they eventually changed that to an original theme song later. Again, so make sure that you have that permission. There's ways to do that. It does cost money if you want to use those things. I still don't know how exactly some of the recap shows get away with like playing like the dialogue from the television shows, but it's if you just don't want to deal with that, then I would just suggest to use original work. And it's a great way to promote your favorite other artists, local musicians. The last thing I'll mention is compensation. So this is always, in any situation, this is always you have to tread lightly when you're talking about, if you want to have guests on, and then, some people who are, who may have like a more of a public persona, you may think that they always want to be compensated. Not necessarily. Sometimes all of the guests that we've had on our show, we have all been able to have on their show just because we asked. So send an email through you can sign up for an IMDb Pro account, which is one way to get in touch with um, people who are like performers or things. So you can get an IMDb Pro account because that will, you pay the money to have access to that, to be able to get to people that way. Or you could just send them an email, tweet at them. I've messaged people on Instagram that's turned into, I messaged someone on Instagram and then like a month later I was in their home talking to them about their life and their work. And I'm always very upfront with, we're not able to compensate you monetarily, but we do have this type of reach. So if you have if you know what your listenership is like, if you know what your numbers are in terms of downloads and things, this is how you can, that's how they also get their word out there as well. So it becomes a kind of a trade. But just be very honest about the fact that if you're not going to compensate them monetarily, that you let them know that right away. But also respect the fact that if there is, if they do have a speaking fee, if they do, for their time, then that's something that they have for themselves. So you want to make sure that you respect that as well. And let's see. Next slide. So those, everything I said was the basics. I talked your ear off about a lot of technical things. So what do you do now? So where do we go? Well, now we get started. So you have your concept, you have your goals. You want to do research first. So, and by research, I mean you want to look at other podcasts and see podcasts that are out there and see if there's anyone that's doing anything remotely close to what you're doing. So for example, I have a show that's about horror movies. There's a lot of horror movie podcasts. I can name 5 right off the top of my head, but each one has a very specific point of view. And that's something that can't be replicated, is your point of view. And you are also the reason why none of this can be replicated, because those shows don't have you on it. My point of view for Fright School is that I am someone who, up until 5 years ago, I have never seen a horror film, seen any of the classics. And after my friend created a curriculum of 16 American horror films that are like the foundation of American horror, we talk about, I now consider myself like a fan. And usually the shows are, we see something, we watch a film and I've usually never seen it, and we talk about it from a first timer's perspective. And then lately we go more into like the cultural, social significance of the films. That's also evolved as well. So, me and my host and myself, we're both queer individuals. So we, in a lot of our, we talk a lot about the queer theory and representation that's in different horror films, and queerness in horror as well, too. So you want to make sure you research, because if someone is going to say, oh, your show is like this, you want to be able to come back and say, no, this is the reason why we're different. It's sort of like this, but it's not. The more you know what's out there doing something similar to what you're doing, the more you can further cement your identity about what it is that you're trying to do. And then you should also record a trailer. So record a trailer. The trailer can be just your theme music and the date of when it's going to drop. It can be a very short 1 minute synopsis of what the show is going to be. It can be just clips of episodes you've already recorded, but definitely record a trailer and release it, so that way you can make sure that it gets pushed out to the different podcatchers right away. It gets your cover art there on all of their different libraries, but it just gets something out there for the people to for you to point to when you're marketing your show in the very early stages. I recommend that you also record the first 5 episodes before releasing. So record a bunch of episodes in advance. Give yourself that time to just record things. If you're doing a weekly show, give yourself those first 5 weeks right away. It's a good way to get into the groove of things, see what works, what doesn't. And I also recommend dropping those first 5 episodes all at once. So your first time that you have actual content, just drop the first 5. People will continue to listen after the first 5. And if they continue to listen after the first 5, then they'll listen for as long as you're doing your episodes. It also gives you an idea to, come back to it. With Fright School, we released our first 5 episodes, and it was a very different format starting with episode 6, because we realized, after listening back to how we were talking, we realized this didn't work, that didn't work. And so we made those changes in real time. Make sure you have your cover art. iTunes, which is the standard that everyone goes to for podcasting, they have there's very specific formatting rules for what goes on your cover art. And there's a lot that's written out there about how to have cover art that's catchy or what have you. I recommend just going with a drawing. Again, hire an artist, hire somebody, pay them, so that way you own the rights you own those images, and make sure to give them credit when you're doing your credits. Another thing too is, and this is not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but it's something that's worked for me, is commit to a year, commit to 6 months, commit to a certain amount of time that you want to do this show, and then reevaluate with your partner, with yourself, what's working, what's not working. This way you are, you're fully invested, you're to producing that content for that time. And if you still want to keep going, if you want to think about adjusting the format or adjusting your goal and your focus, you can have that conversation. But definitely commit to at least 6 months to a year. And the second column over here is when you're talking about how to have a bigger reach. After you have a couple episodes, people start writing reviews. You can start putting a media kit together. So put together a kit of, pictures of you and your co-host, or just you, what it is that you talk about. Put together a list of your best episodes with the best interviews or content, and have that ready to distribute to people if you're interested, especially networks. Podcasting, like television, there are networks out there and networks have, a variety of different types of shows. I'm in the process right now of putting our media kit together to shop out to different networks. So you want to make sure that if that's something you're interested in, get to know those people, and make sure that you just send them your kit. It could be a link to a Dropbox file, a Dropbox folder that has everything. It could be a USB drive. It could be an actual media kit printed out. That's always just a good thing to have in general. And then if you're interested in monetizing your show, if you're interested in letting your show, your passion, pay the bills, you're going to basically do that with advertising, just as any influencer will tell you. You do that with advertising. And there's a whole world that goes into how to advertise and what people pay for what different placement and all of that. But, advertising, you're definitely going to have to do if you're interested in monetizing the show. Anyone have any questions or comments or general things regarding podcasting, or things that you want clarification on, or corrections? I'm also open to corrections as well.
Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with some of the ideas for your current podcasts, and how you were able to kind of make sure that you had this idea, besides just being you or you and the relationship that you have with your co-hosts, like what about those things were appealing to you and how you made them something that was unique to you?
Sure, absolutely. That's a really great question. So, um, I'll just go in order. So, with the first show that I had, the Untitled Friendship Project, I realized that like I had a very eclectic group of friends, and that they all had done really cool things in their lives, and I wanted to basically just sit down with them and get them to talk about themselves. I have one friend who was in one of the first cohorts of the Actors Studio, and actually did was in classes with Bradley Cooper, and talking about method acting and what that means. So, and then I have another friend who worked as an HIV/AIDS counselor in San Diego, and talking a little bit about his experience in that regard. So I really just thought like, wow, I really want to have a platform to show and to get their messages and, things that were important to them out there. Um, with the other shows, Fright School came because I would go over to my friend Joshua's house to watch American Horror Story, and they would talk about how the show was referencing different films, and I told him, oh, I'd never seen that before, and he said, oh, well, maybe you should just come and I will give you an education. And then that turned into, a year later, turned into us saying, well, why don't we turn this into a show? It could actually be a really good one. Um, and yeah, so it really, for me, it also kind of depends on the relationship that you have with the co-host. So if you have a person that you have a really, you're open to communication, you have a very strong rapport with, then they potentially could be your podcasting partner. If you question their work ethic, maybe it's not a good idea to engage them or venture into something creative, which is definitely this is creative. You also want to make sure you have a good, clear division of duties. So, for me in my shows, I'm the mixer, editor. I basically run all of the technical things, and then my co-hosts do a lot of the creative. That's not to say that that's hard and fast. I do have some creative input as well, but we do have that clear division of duties. Um, and and be open to evolving things. So Fright School started out as like, I know nothing about horror, and then now we're 117 episodes in, and so I do know things about horror. So how do you still make the podcast relevant? Well, we can talk about, these specific genres. We talk about a lot about queer issues in theory and representation, which is one way that one of the ways that I can also insert a lot of my identity in there. We talk to different people that, always something new to learn. And being open to the format changing a little bit is also what makes podcasting great, is the fact that it can change. It's not a television show where you have to wait an entire season. If you want to change things right away, you can do it overnight if you want to. Um, yeah, and I think that answers your question. I just hope that for me, I just want I'm always willing to, and always willing to change things, and especially see what works, what doesn't. And anytime you have like a really good idea, especially for like a new podcast, you writing about it and outlining it a little bit more is always a great place to start too. But it also has to be something that you care about. I mean, I didn't really think I would care about horror movies a lot, but I thought that it was such a cool idea and something I hadn't seen before that I just had to go with it. And sometimes that's also the inspiration too. Any other questions or comments? Things that you might be interested in knowing?
I wanted to ask, how do you avoid burnout, and keep like a consistent schedule?
That is a very good question. burnout is real. Let's just, in burnout in everything, but burnout, especially in podcasting, is real. And it's, especially in the format that we're doing right now with the physically distance, being in front of screens all the time. It's one thing when I can just go to my co-host's house and just lay on his couch for a little bit before our next recording session, but very different situation when you're doing it this way. What I will say is ways to avoid burnout. You can one thing that I like to do is I like to record a lot of episodes if we can do it. I like to record a lot of episodes in a short amount of time. So if you're releasing a weekly podcast like I do with Fright School, you can actually we sometimes will record everything. We record a month's worth of episodes in one weekend, so that's 4 different episodes all in one day, or sometimes a day and a half. And then what that does is that we dedicate a lot of really hard work. Everything gets edited, everything gets scheduled to be released. And then we can basically take those 4 weeks as time off from the hard work of actually doing it. This works well for a lot of podcasts. There are most podcasts that are out there, especially with like comic podcasts and some of the horror podcasts that we know. They'll record things like they're easily 2 months to a month and a half in out with their recordings. The challenges that creates is that you're never commenting on what's current. So a trailer could be released for a new movie, but you're not going to talk about it for another 2 months. So sometimes people will release will release episodes immediately just to comment on things like that. To go back to your question, that's one of the ways you can avoid burnout is to just block off time, dedicate a chunk of time to just doing recordings. And that way, once you have all of that finished, you can kind of it doesn't occupy as much of your time and your energy as you're having newer episodes be released. Granted, you're still promoting them, so you're posting about them on social media, you're engaging with people who are commenting on it. You're having to also like recall what it is that you said this weekend where you were recording like 4 different episodes as people are talking to you about it. So but you're not physically recording. The other thing I will say is that sometimes you just need to take a break. So with podcasting, you can always say, and we're going to take a little bit of take a break, and we'll be back, in 2 weeks. Maybe you find that the weekly format is exhausting and you go to every 2 weeks, you go to once a month. That's all really flexible. And again, since it's your show, you're creating it, you can change the rules how you like. There was a point where with Fright School, we've taken a couple of really significant breaks. We took one when we were kind of examining what our next steps were, where we didn't record new episodes for like 4 months. We took a couple months off when my co-host had a loss in his family, so we took that time off. And because we were formatted after like a school year, sometimes more often than not, we'll take like a winter holiday break or a spring break and like a week or 2 in the summer, as just a way for us to have a little bit of time to decompress. And another way to avoid burnout is to also have a good schedule. Be honest with your calendar. Do a shared calendar with your host. Be realistic about the time that you can commit when you can be there. There was once a month where Joshua, my co-host for Fright School, and we were both traveling at different weeks for like a week at a time, and we recorded all of the episodes for that month the month prior, so that way we didn't have to worry about not being in the same area. But with planning, with taking breaks when you need to, with doing it all at once and releasing them in increments, those are ways that you can hopefully avoid burnout.
Thanks so much for your answer.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's very important. I'm glad that you brought that up. It's not all fun and games, and sometimes when you're in it and when you're going, it feels really good, but then there are just some days where you think you're going to have a really great guest and it's not a good it's not a good interview. It's like you're trying to squeeze out blood from a stone, and it can get really taxing when those things happen. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because um, it's important for people to know that it doesn't have to be. There are ways to avoid burnout if you can. Okay. Well, if you have any other questions, folks, this is me at our first horror convention. Uh, just a sidebar, that convention was like in a ballroom. We had like no space behind that table. We were cramped together. Everyone was well within 3 feet of each other the entire weekend. But it was so much fun. And we just talked to people all the time. But if you have any questions, my email information is there. My information for my podcast, Fright School, is up there as well. We're also on Instagram, Fright School. If you want horror memes, horror comedy memes, go to the Fright School Instagram. If you want memes just about Beyonce and Oprah, go to the Art Time of the Month, which is my other show, and then MFK Ultimate, which we released in March at the beginning of the shelter in place orders, and we've been managing to, and we actually recorded like 2 months worth of episodes prior to that. And we're still doing well. We actually got picked up by a network. So we're a part of the Geekscape network of podcasts for MFK Ultimate. So check that out as well. And all of my shows are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Listen, don't listen. One thing I will also, the last thing I'll leave you is that it's perfectly okay if none of your friends listen to your podcasts. That's perfectly okay. Yes, we would like to think that everyone, especially when you're spending so much time with doing this, that you just want everyone to consume it and listen. I come from the idea of like, if it speaks to you, then you'll listen, but I never think it's mandatory for anyone in my life to be a like number one fan of any of my shows. Mainly because a lot of people that I know, they have like a mental block on horror films, or they don't care about the halftime show with Shakira and J-Lo as much as I do. I talked about that in the episode of Art Time. So, just allow people that space to not listen to your podcast, but also be very appreciative when they do. And be very appreciative when they do, and you'd be surprised who does listen. Let's put it that way. To the show, there's plenty of people where I'm like, oh, I love what you said about this, or this. They'll post on social media, oh, this reminds me of this. You'll be surprised who listens. I just wouldn't don't be that person that's like, listen to my podcast. If you can help it all, if you can help it all that much. Thank you again for having me. Thank you, APIMEDA Programs and Services. Thank you, Wendy, and all of her staff. I'm so happy to count myself as part of this community, both podcasting and the UCSD APIMEDA alums. So if you need anything, I'm here. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.